Hi everyone, Elizabeth here. So I'm in this really pretty part of Seattle. It's called Green Lake. I just wanted to do a quick little video. There's been so many topics that I've wanted to talk about, but there's a part of me that just doesn't really want to waste any energy complaining and talking about the same things that everybody else is talking about, like current events and hot topics, because it just I'm at a point of confusion in terms of if it's beneficial. I mean, some of opinions and points of views can shed some light on certain things, but it also continues the ball of either manifesting a more chaotic society or just I'm not sure if it benefits a whole lot. But yeah, I don't know if you could see if I go down below there, you got some fish swimming around. So it's a really cute, pretty spot that I thought I would do a video. I got some blackberry bushes over there, which maybe I'll try to pick some if they don't look, some don't look that ripe. But I had a friend send me a video today on Instagram, and it was the funniest video I think I've ever seen. I just was dying laughing out loud, and it was about Burning Man and kind of cracking a joke about Burning Man and kind of how it was like a massive failed social experiment, and it's a corporate tech funded event that was for kind of like trust fund babies, and they eat bluefin tuna that's helicoptered in by a billionaire. And so it's just really, really funny. I just cracked up laughing because I did go to Burning Man in 2016, and I lived in Germany between 2014 and 15. And ever since I was younger, I always really wanted to go to Burning Man. I wanted to try it and just see what it was about, because I always liked art and nature, obviously, and then a lot at the time I also really liked a lot of the electronica music. So I just believe life did kind of guide me there at the point in time that I needed to go. And in 2016 the theme was Vincis Workshop, so it kind of fit the theme from transitioning from moving to Europe back to the States. And I kind of just want to talk a little bit about my experience very briefly, and then just kind of talk about how it actually kind of led me more toward I don't know what you'd want to call it, Christ consciousness, or toward Jesus, toward Christianity, like I said, whatever label you want to put to it. So after living in Europe, moving to Europe, I definitely was highly involved in like Reiki and yoga and meditation. I still teach yoga and meditation, and I find that a lot of the new age components can be helpful to some people, but however, there is like a trap or a loop that people get kind of stuck in. You can get a lot of spiritual narcissistic type of personalities more attracted in that area, especially when it comes to something like power yoga. It's definitely way more egotistical and egoic than what it goes against the grain of what yoga tries to teach you, which is about being humble and the spiritual being having a human experience. So ironically, it's just not its true nature. When I went to Burning Man, I was very intuitive at the time. I think I still am. I do feel like COVID and being locked down for 2 years in Seattle and then being online more because of having an Etsy shop. Like, I had to find other different ways, some form of income. I don't live off of it. It just supplements my income. So I started selling a lot of my vintage and antique things. But I feel like the more time that I've spent on tech, I'm not as sensitive intuitively. Like, I still have a lot of instincts, but it's like those things that you'd get like a gut feeling or the tingling over your body. I definitely feel like that has lessened over the last couple of years due to being on tech more. And here we had a 2-year lifestyle change. We were locked down pretty hardcore in the West Coast. So I was very much more energetically sensitive, let's put it that way, back at that time. And the moments that I got onto the desert, I just felt like there's light and dark that exists at the desert. And as I explored the entire week, I primarily stayed sober the whole time. I had maybe like 5 or 6 drinks the whole time. It was just so hot. I didn't eat much. I'm not really big into drinking alcohol. I don't do drugs. It was just a very interesting kind of learning experience to see how tech people and corporate people tend to release and relieve and burn their stress in a more quote unquote dysfunctional way, in my opinion, rather than trying to get to the root of their problems. So I kind of felt like one part of Burning Man definitely was just an excuse for a bunch of stressed out corporate and tech people to run to the desert and do a bunch of drugs and kind of bang one another. And, you know, whatever, I'm all about choice and lifestyle. So if they, at their day job, needed to look like a brute man and they wanted to wear a skirt and tap into their feminine energy at the desert, like, I'm for whatever somebody wants to do, as long as they don't try to, you know, force and change things on what I or anybody else wants to do or how they want to live their life. And a couple camps down, there was a couple camps that were like mock churches. So they definitely bashed and they hated Jesus, bashed Christianity. And I could just feel this like visceral hate for religion, but for anybody with Christian values and Jesus in general. And so as I was there, you kind of had your quote unquote old school kind of Burning Man hippie people that were like your Reiki energy healers that were there to commune with the desert, provide healing services. And then there was just the other side, maybe you would just call it more the darker side, which was the drugs, habitual drinking, doesn't matter if you're married or not, the commingling, the orgy tents, like whatever you want to say, it was there. I do remember at the time when it was ready for the burn, it was this beautiful sunset that was happening over the desert, and I walked back into my tent to grab something, and as I came out, it was like a black sky. Like literally in the matter of 20 seconds, the sky went from this beautiful pink desert sunset to this black sky, wind burning like fucking crazy, just blowing everything sideways. I mean, you could not see more than 1 or 2 minutes in front of me. And so everybody at my camp, we were trying to find the direction to go toward the actual man that was about to go on fire. And like my intuition kind of popped at that moment, and it was like, I'm gonna make you guys suffer before we burn this thing, before you burn your trauma or whatever you want to go through. And I told that to one of my campmates who doesn't believe in anything. They're just a tech atheist, and they kind of laughed at me like I was, you know, funny or crazy or whatever. Like, oh, this is spiritual quirky people again. And it was just, it just felt like the darkness was trying to purge and burn, or something was at that desert to try to make us suffer a little bit before you purge and burn everything. Now, it depends on if you think of this stuff as completely demonic or satanic in general, or if you think of it as, you know, energetically you can burn off a bunch of negative energy. It depends on what your viewpoint or your thought process is on that. But right as we got to the man, it was just like the wind stopped. I mean, this was like blowing sand sideways. I've never seen anything like it. Like it was kind of a guessing game. We had no clue if we were walking north, south, east, or west. We just kind of knew, kind of head that way and hope you don't run into a tent or a piece of art. It was really interesting to experience. So a lot of my experience was healing around, I guess, reverse culture shock of Europe, the things that I experienced in Europe. You know, I remember the few times I ended kind of after the migration crisis, and I rode my bike around the Mash Z in Hanover, which is kind of actually a lot like this. It's like I would call it like the Green Lake of Hanover. Hanover, Germany, in my opinion, was very similar to Portland and Seattle. It had a lot of green space for being an urban city. It was there was a massive forest like right in the middle of the city. And they had a lake similar to this where you have a path that you can walk around. And I remember some of the few times kind of after the crisis happened and I was about to leave Europe in like a month, I rode my bike around and I just started crying while I was listening to music. And I closed my eyes for a moment and I just saw a big emerald and a big green gem. And the only thing my mind kept saying was like, you're seeing the last gem on earth, especially for women. And it just hit me to my gut where I just cried for like a week because I just couldn't handle, I mean, Germany in general is really safe at the time. I rode bikes at 3-4 in the morning. Never had a problem with German men. If anything, you know, German men were a little bit more passive. If they walked up to you, because married people in Germany wear a ring on the right and Americans, we wear rings on the left hand. And so I'd be like, oh, ich bin verheiratet, or I can't even remember how to say it, but which means I'm married. And they would just, oh, I'm so sorry, they just left you alone. And I just felt like what has happened in Europe, especially in Germany, and the rape epidemic that has been happening over the last few years, kind of averaging multiple rapes a day, and the shit that's been happening to the German women, because the German people have been so fucking naive because they've lived in a cute little bubble for so long and have no sense of danger. Maybe that's like the point of living in America, is like some of us have a little bit of a intuition of, or a little bit of more knack to understand what is a good and a bad part of a city, or, you know, people who kind of rub you the wrong way. I don't really know. But that was very saddening for me. And the desert helped me heal that. However, I would say that during this time of living in a Lutheran Christian nation and seeing how Christianity was, and going through all my own personal journeying of understanding Jesus and Christianity, I started having Jesus experiences before I went to Burning Man. And then as I was there, I saw these intellectuals. I don't even know if I would call it intellectuals, maybe highly intelligent human robots. I don't even know if highly intelligence isn't the word. I mean, intellectual, there's a difference between intellect and intelligence. And people had the intellect to create things, like create computers and robots and software programs and stuff, but they had a very big disconnect when it came to the human heart, although they fought for the same notions that you want a kind world, and they fought for the same politicians who lived and breathed like, hey, let's create a very loving utopia in our nation, although they, you know, now we know how evil those people were and still are. So there was just a disconnect. There was a disconnect with the people who were tapping in so far into the left brain that there was absolutely no right brain wisdom, or even tapping into the feeling body at all. Although they were highly emotionally driven, they hated everybody who voted Republican or wasn't like them. They kind of just naturally thought everybody else was like them, and that everybody who went to the playa would vote for Hillary Clinton and stuff like that. And I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, that's pretty fucking ridiculous. Like, that just doesn't seem like it. But as seeing these kind of, you know, mock churches that were not churches for Satan. I mean, maybe they were evolving that, but their camp was just basically like, fuck Jesus. Like, sorry for my French, but that's pretty much the best and easiest explanation for it. And I started having Jesus experiences before I went to Burning Man, and then for like a year afterwards. And seeing it, I was like, you know, this actually is kind of like a pagan thing in general, but there was something there, that light in the dark, especially the dark side, that just seemed very dysfunctional in some way, because it was super consumeristic. If you think about it, when you cannot be satisfied by one boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and you need to consume more of that to fulfill your sexual drive, I mean, it's whatever, it's an addiction. A lot of people who go to Burning Man say they're nihilistic in general. Generally, a lot of narcissists do admit that they are narcissistic in nature. But after I went, I reflected on it, and I was crying at the airport to come home, because it was like a little utopia. It was really nice to be, you know, you don't have to worry about money. Like, oh, you need food, you need water, here you go. Like, it was kind of seeing some benefits of the human spirit. However, you had Burning Man disconnected itself from its original roots, and it became a sellout to corporate tech world. I mean, you're looking at pieces of art that were funded by Silicon Valley, whether it's Silicon Valley in general or just individuals part of Silicon Valley that are $500,000 to $600,000. I thought, my God, something is just off here. It kind of felt like a government experiment, a social government experiment. That's exactly what I thought. At the time, I've heard of MK Ultra, but I never really knew about it really until like 2 or 3 years ago when I started reading about it. And I was like, oh, I think Burning Man is like the new MK Ultra, just due to the fact that you have this event that's on government land. It's governed by the Bureau, BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, and you have a bunch of people there doing a shit ton of drugs. Obviously, they have visceral hate for anything organized religion-wise, and I was like, I think when you're filled up with that so much hate, it's like there needs to be healing around that topic. And a lot of people have had bad religious experiences. I get it, but those type of open wounds is an invitation for healing around it. Because if we didn't live in a Christian nation, if we lived in an atheistic nation, I mean, would we just all be self-consumed with ourselves? How is society going to function when you have a bunch of people doing a bunch of drugs all day long, having sex with anything that has a hole in it? It's some of it's slightly delusional, especially when you look at, I don't know what you'd call it, like Furbies or fur babies. I just learned about this, which is like people dress up in fur costumes and pretend they're animals and only attracted to that. And at some point when you start attaching certain things to religion of a perception from like a satanic point of view versus a godly point of view, then you can start to put the pieces of the puzzle together that some things maybe aren't as benign or as innocent as they were meant to be, or everything gets destroyed from its original intentions. So people have the ability to go to the desert and heal themselves and, look at the stars. The sky is like, you go to a desert, you could see all the stars in the sky. It's kind of like what the Native Americans once experienced, right? I mean, maybe music inspires you and moves you into some form of creative process, but it just seems like instead of using the land for what it can do for people, it's like you just consume off of it. And there's a lot of people who've been burners for a while that are not happy with how it's turned out, and I understand that, but it's kind of interesting to me too that some people just don't really graduate from it. Like, you just kind of stay in this community, and it kind of can be culty a little bit. You're not like us. You want to dress up like this, then you're not really a part of us, and that is a shame. But when I left there and reflected on a lot of things, I was just like, oh boy, I was so iffy and wishy-washy about Jesus, and I thought, oh gosh, here we go. And I just kind of rolled with it, and here I am. And there's a lot of people kind of from that new age area just have had similar experiences. But what we have to know is that there's function and there's dysfunction. So you can use God's creation to help you heal. However, the dysfunctional part of it probably is the satanic darker energy. I don't find, now that government and Johns Hopkins University and all these other areas are getting their hands on medicinal healing with marijuana and psychedelics and stuff like that, for me, that is like a massive red flag. Like, stay off that shit. You don't need it. I really just think you don't need drugs to help heal yourself. You just really need to work through your unresolved issues, develop your spirit, develop your mind. A couple other reasons why Burning Man kind of led me to more Christ-like experiences, not only seeing the absolute hate that these people had for Christianity, but their egotism around it was like, everybody else is stupid and I'm smarter, and that in itself is narcissistic in general. But I also talked to quite a bit of people that I met from Seattle. There were two friends. They were younger at the time, like 22, 23, and they were like, do you want to come to the bathroom? And I'm like, no. And so I think they were doing coke at the time. And they were just telling me how Microsoft would have these workshops or conferences, whatever you want to call it, team meetings, and they were in the belief system because of Microsoft that humans were moving toward a utopia where we would just create all day and robots would be the workers of society. So the robots would do all the work and the humans would be creative, just like the Renaissance time. And I thought, oh shit, you guys are indoctrinated as hell. Like anything tech and corporations alongside government is like pure evil. And I even thought that back in 2016, and I didn't even know as much as I know now in 2022. But I think when they call spiritual people delusional, I'm like, you guys are just as much in a delusional reality, thinking that Microsoft is going to guide us and Jeff Bezos, these assholes, are going to guide us to a utopia where you're just going to be a creative artist like a 1500s Renaissance woman. And, some machines are just going to be our servers and waiters and builders. I just was like, what? And plus, why would you want that reality? Because there's a disconnect there. There is no human experience. Humans have emotions. Robots don't. It's going to be another topic video in itself on, I think, why a lot of tech guys have a hard time dating is because they're so robotic. They're not in touch with their own, I don't know, energy or spirit. It just feels cold and detached. I think to conclude everything, it was the amount of hate that they had that did push me further. And ironically, I just heard the Bible verse yesterday as I went to a service at a Lutheran church. And it said, I, as God, will not forsake you, like I will not leave you. And as I saw that Burning Man video and thought about that biblical verse yesterday, it's like God and Jesus will always be there with you. So maybe I had to go there and experience what it was like, or actually kind of see what a social experiment was like. And what blows my mind is these individuals think they're on the top of the intellectual food chain, and in reality, they're at the bottom. They are a tool and a pawn for the elite or the government, corporations, whatever. It's really sad. It's kind of disheartening to see that. It's just a very vain, narcissistic world that we live in now. And a lot of Christ's teachings go against the things that I saw at the playa, which is just being about humble and love and acceptance. And that's the problem. There is not much of that coming from that community for people who do believe in Christ. And there's a lot of energy healers I know are not, or once knew because they don't live in the city anymore. They're not religious, but they highly believe in Christ as like the ultimate light bearer, whatever the hell you want to call it, light being. I don't really use those nomenclatures, but if you think about Christ being the incarnation of God's soul, he was kind of the greatest healer that ever lived on this planet. So the light and the dark exists there, more so the dark and the vanity and the self-destruction. Somebody that I did go to Burning Man with, we did not travel there together, but she stuck a bunch of ecstasy up her vagina before going to the airport. And I just, to me, I was just thinking, like, if there's that much of a need to have a good time, it's kind of sad when people suffer from mental health and they continue to mess up their own chemicals and emotions with a bunch of ecstasy and drugs just due to the fact that they think they're going to have this enlightening experience, and then they're fucked up for like 6 to 9 months afterwards because they took so much drugs that their body is coming down from all the doping of the serotonin and the chemical releases that they did to themselves. So that is self-destruction, and that does not come from God or from Jesus. So I don't know if I was really on point with some of the points that I tried to make, but it was just a lot of that self-reflection and analyzing this kind of culture and community. Because maybe something like a Burning Man could actually be kind of healing if it was, completely revolved around nature, healing, art, music, no drugs, no orgy tents, just, you know, being one with yourself and God's creation or whatever. Alrighty, that's been long enough. Thank you for listening, liking, sharing, subscribing. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.